Well, thank you guys for coming to Lodi Con, and we'll get started with this. I know both of you have actually master's degrees in the arts, and what I want to do is start off with the importance of language. I know Taylor, you come from the stage background and did a little Richard III and Shakespeare, and Vanessa, I know that you studied dialects in college. So talk about the importance of language as a voice actor.
Wow, that is a great question that no one has brought up. We've done a handful of these things. By the way, hi everyone. And it's so fun when you get asked questions that you haven't been asked. And as we were walking over here, Vanessa and I were just talking about how important communication is. And communication is nothing without language. And then acting is another layer that you bring to that language. And I was always taught that any idea at its germination should be at its best. And then when it's written down into a page, now it's at its new best. And once it's acted, now it's at its next best. And then if it's going to be on camera, once it's captured and edited, that's the final product. And it should always get better. And so what we're given, it's our job to take in and let it sit with us and ruminate on, and then bring ourselves to it so we can elevate something from the dialogue. And for example, with this, Star Wars, like what Dave has written, and then bring it into these characters and bring it to life. And I think that's all part of just communicating, because at the end of the day, we're just trying to communicate a story of these characters and what their reality is. And I think that's what we're all doing every day, and that's why you kind of hear that trope often that everyone's an actor. And it's true to some extent. How many times have we told our parents that we loved the green beans they made us, and we didn't love the green beans. We don't love the green beans, but we want that ice cream float later. So everything is communication at the end of the day.
And Vanessa, for you, about language and being able to communicate that out to the audience.
Again, great question. Hello, Vanessa Marshall. Nice to see everybody. I went to Princeton for undergrad, and I majored in English. There's a lot of words involved there. And
just a few.
Just a couple. And my senior thesis was pretty trippy. It was a Gertrude Stein play called Photograph. And I produced the play in the art museum. And the idea was that, if you can just bear with me for a second, that what Picasso did with paint and colors, Gertrude Stein did with words and her literature. And Picasso captures many moments in one still image. And she tried to do the same with her writing. And I was meditating on art, communication, the power of words, the value of language. And for me, always, as an only child who was a huge theater nerd and a huge Star Wars fan, the value of storytelling in terms of its sacred ability to bring us all together. And that has just meant the world to me. And whether I'm a wordsmith, or the reason I got into Princeton is because of my sculpture, as a matter of fact. And that's another form of storytelling. And I would do these mixed media sculptures. I would take garbage and turn it into art, because I think when you recontextualize things, words or objects, does this sound kind of weird-ish? That we look at things in a new light, and what can once be seen as trash is actually treasure. And that goes for all sorts of things. But for me, with a background in theater and caring very much about what unites us as a culture, that we can learn from our mistakes and different stories in history. For me, language is everything, and communication is everything, and storytelling in any format, whether it's a comic book, a movie, a book, television shows, any of that, all of those things. I love how particularly the Star Wars fandom brings us all together. And of course, George Lucas was a huge fan of Joseph Campbell and the power of myth and all those archetypes, that there's a hero in each and every one of us, and each and every one of us matters. And it's important that we step up to the plate and see what we can do. When you talk about when Ezra first went into hyperspace, dude, it is kind of scrunchy. Ezra doesn't know what space looks like. Oh, it must be because I get near you. But that was your first time in outer space. There's something delicious about that moment when your journey, your character's journey, greeting all of that and rising to the occasion. Look at the difference that your character made and continues to make, and inspires other young men to do the same. So I think it's of supreme value.
And then also, you speak of visualization. When you get a script, and especially as a voice artist, how do you visualize that character? How do you visualize that voice and make it your own by just the words that you see on the page?
Well, with Ezra, I just did this voice. This is Ezra's voice. This question is much better suited for Vanessa, who's done plenty of voices, because I've only done Ezra, and then I did a Buffalo Wild Wings thing, and I did the same voice again. And in turn, it's just really starting to bite me in the butt, because they think it's all the same characters. And to be fair, they all have the same voice. And so it is interesting, but it was the one question I would ask Dave over and over and over again when we were in the booth. I understand the character stuff. I was like, how far away from this character am I? Like, am I shouting across a ravine, or are they standing next to me? Because when you're doing an animated thing, you have no clue what the shot is. And that's context for, like, are we being secretive? Like, is there a stormtrooper over there? Are we talking under our breath? Or whatever that may be. So I was always concerned with just, like, what the framing and spatially where we were. But as far as the voice that I hear for it, it's that annoying voice that is in my head relentlessly.
Well, again, it's one thing that I think is a value is not to go from the outside in when creating a character. In other words, it should sound like this. That is hollow if you go for a sound. But if you go from the inside out, this is what this character cares about. What does that sound like? It's just a different process. And what's ironic, however, when I tell stories, I imitate people's voices, and people are like, oh, please stop schmacting. And I'm like, no, you can't understand. Okay, for example, and I love my mom, but when I make her coffee, she says, oh, God, I can't drink that. It's not piping hot. And it's like, and I could have said, oh, God, I can't drink that. It's not piping hot. I don't know that you understand my level of, like, agony as an 8th grader, looking at her going, and scene. Like, Mom, it's just coffee. Drink it, you know? So I've always been someone who lets you know just how weird an experience was by doing a voice or whatever it is. And that's part of my storytelling. And it came in handy in voiceover. The role of Mary Jane is a friend of mine. Face it, Tiger, you just hit the jackpot. That's a friend. So the reason I mention that is because the specificity of doing that imitation, I know how my friend reacts to each and every situation. And reading the script, Mary Jane's personality very much reminded me of my friend, so I did an imitation of my friend. Now, what I think people respond to when they hear that audition is the specificity. I know that person, and a number of roles that I've booked have been imitations of people that I know because I know those voices. So that's interesting. Hera, I related to her values. I don't have children, but I am a full-blown space mom. I have a catered meal in my bag if you're hungry. Like, I've got Band-Aids. I've got, like, I'm 100% a space mom. And I think Hera's voice is very similar to my own in that sense. Like, I don't have a Buffalo Wild Wings campaign yet, but, you know, we'll work on it. It's actually, they catered our lunch, and I was like, this guy's the voice of your thing. Whatever, I'll just work on it.
That's why we got a discount.
There it is. I love that. I don't know if y'all saw those things like Ezra's eating at Wild Wing, whatever. Anyway, but my point is that I've learned from those experiences that while not every character needs to be an imitation, I think Hera is so close to my heart because I care about a lot of the things that she cares about. And so I guess life imitates art or vice versa, but I think that makes all the difference in terms of setting someone's read apart from someone else's who's trying to sound like X, Y, or Z. So.
And one thing I was looking at an interview with Taylor about was actually also having to do the voices or the reactions of getting punched in the stomach or an actual reaction Talk a little bit about that, because I thought that was really an interesting part of voice acting. I don't think people think of. They think, okay, script, go.
Yeah, I didn't know about that part, and let me tell you, that's the hardest day. Vanessa, what is it called? Walla? No.
Well, ADR, Walla, yeah.
ADR, like there was a day set apart that is just 100 different scenarios, like jump 5 feet, jump 10 feet, punched hard, punched really hard, and you're just reacting to these different things that you're like, what am I doing? But it is very stressful on your voice, and it's also just so confusing because you're like, I felt so lost, but I was so fortunate to be able to follow like Vanessa and Steve and Freddie, who all just stepped up, nailed it. Like, here's a 1, here's a 5, here's a 10, here's a 1, and just one after another. And so I found that so impressive, but also very taxing, and something that you don't think about with the script. That some of those things in the scene, if it's like Ezra got blown back by the Force, most likely I didn't do that while we did the scene, or I gave a very half attempt at it, but then they would pull it from that
A library of sound.
library of sound that they had for our characters. But she's the real champ at that. That stuff is impressive.
I did the same thing. I had it. My first day was like that too. I think the game was EverQuest. Does that make sense? Yeah, I had to die by fire, die by electrocution, die by drowning, die by spear, die by, and I was like, bro, how many deaths? Like, what is happening? And, totally shredded my vocal cords at the end. I'm worth it, but, and if you ever need to be shocked, just a little key point.
Yes, these are the tricks we're looking for.
Yeah. I mean, you can sit there just going, or you can go, these are the things, but I learned that watching Steve Bloom do it at a session. So, and then when I did Marvel vs. Capcom video game, the director, Jonathan Klein, he did Street Fighter, all the Street Fighters, and oh my gosh, he's amazing. But when he directed me, he was like, take different vowel sounds and different percussive sounds. So, ka, like, then go to G. G, ah, ga. And I was like, yo, that is a gold mine. I know, because otherwise, it reminds me, I'm going to digress here. I was discovered as a plus-size model. Don't ask. I've lost 50 pounds and kept it on for like 20 years. But when I first got the job, it reminded me, as a model, you have to like do 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. Like, but when someone said, imagine the face of the clock, and that's how you, I mean, for Kmart and this and that, I would do these ads in like I don't think anyone would look anorexic in these, but it was like a big muumuu with like a wolf running across it. I mean, it was like all my dreams come true. It was so awesome. And they pay you like crazy money to stand there and go, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. Anyway, but very similar learning curve to how do you die by fire, by spear, by laser, but then once you get it down, it's not so bad. And Tia called me on the way to a Young Justice thing, and she was like, oh my God, I have to die by drowning. I don't know what I'm going to do. And I was like, Tia, just grab a little bit of water and go. She was like, oh, thank you so much. She did it, nailed it. So, we're all here for each other. It's a team effort.
Well, and Vanessa, your origin story is you did 15 different voices on stage, correct?
Yes, I did a one-woman show. It was kind of SNL in nature. So maybe I was like ahead of my time, but I interacted with previously recorded footage of myself, and it was pretty intense. But there was a voiceover agent there who said, you might want to try animation. All right, so I did. That was 1997. So things have worked out.
Just pretty good, because you went from not only video games and anime, but also you did do one soap. I mean, your mom was in Knots Landing as well.
Oh, yes, I did play my mom as a child in Knots Landing. And the cool story there, if you've heard it before, sorry, but the director was like, look, I need you to cry. And I was like, please. Well, right now? And he was like, if you cry, I will give you a Big Mac. And I was like, bruh. And they're like, and action. And I was like, and I have the picture hung in my It's like full-blown ugly cry action, like genius acting. And then like they're like, and cut. I'm like, Big Mac. And the set was like, oh, she's a born natural. Oh. And I was like, yeah. But yeah, so that's how that went. But I was always more on like the stand-up comedy side of things than like the floral acting section. But I mean, I also love the stories there, but I'm also a bit of a clown, if you can't tell.
And you know, we only have a couple more minutes. And Taylor,
Okay.
I did want to ask you about studying in London. Basically, you are American born, but you decided to study music in London, and what that experience was like.
Yeah, it was. I started acting fairly young, and I think there was this sort of thing in the back of my mind working with some of these bigger actors on sets. I was like, the only thing that some of them have is they've gone to drama school and done the whole thing of like, I felt like I kind of snuck in. I ended up on a show, and then they're like, oh, here, you're the lead of a Nickelodeon show. And I was like, what? I'm just making stuff up. Like, this isn't real. And so I was like, just to tick those boxes, let me go. And I was also dating someone in London at the time, so I was like, I'll read for one school. And if I get in, then I'll keep dating them. And if I don't get in, then we will end this relationship. And she knew that, and it was all fair and fun, and it worked out, and it was incredible. And I went there for a few years, and yeah, they really like break your ego. You wear all black every day, just sweats and a t-shirt. I wore jeans one day, and they went in on me for half an hour about how I'm not a formless shape and how I'm now trying to bring too much to myself. And I was like, honestly, I have no clean sweats. And so they really break you down so that they can build up from a neutral place. Like, who are you as a performer? We first have to find out who you are as a person, take you to zero, and build back up. So it was lovely because I had such a sort of background acting. It was nice to sort of start again fresh. And it's something I would advise, like, not necessarily drama school like that, but to anyone, like, finding yourself, like, who you are in a way so that you can meet the world with everything that it has to bring to you, and you aren't as affected by so many of the things that the world kind of throws at us in ways, and you can kind of shape-shift as you need. And so it was really beneficial, and it was also nice that they speak English. So there were definitely some words that were difficult that they pronounced differently, but other than that, it was a nice little culture difference, but enough that was similar that I was able to get by, and I loved it out there. It was a great time. I just don't do well with the cold.
No, and I appreciate that. We are pretty much out of time, but I wanted to thank Taylor and Vanessa for being a part of our panel discussion. And when you said you started dressing in all black in London, I was thinking you were actually in a monk school and you're going to become a monk. So,
Yeah.
Well, little known fact, I too studied at the National Youth Theatre of Great Britain, and I fell in love with Nigel Woodford. And that's what that study was about. And I also had the same experience. I didn't realize that we shared that part of it, but interesting to learn.
let's give a
Thank
hand
you.
for Vanessa and Taylor. They are over across the way in the hall. Go talk to them. Go learn more about Star Wars and voice acting. And we have wrestling coming up next.
Let's go. Thank you so much, man. That was awesome. Great question.
Sorry about that squeal noise. It's because they're using wireless.
Oh, it happens. Yeah. All good. All good.
So I was trying to like get the direction here.